Up next on Inside the SCCA, not simulators, but driver training tools. My guest on this episode of Inside the SCCA is the co-founder and CEO of Spark Virtual Racing, Matt McGivern. Matt, how are you, sir?
Brian, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show. For those of you who have watched the podcast for a while, you know that we've talked about Matt and his simulators a couple of times, and we've worked with him on several different projects, and I really have been looking forward to doing this podcast for a while, Matt.
Agreed. It's been too long since we caught up, and it's always fun to speak with you.
Absolutely. So, first of all, you know, we all have these perceptions about simulators. I do iRacing. I've done the Rolex 24 and the Daytona, and the Sebring 12 hour. You know, I get in my little man cave and I act like I'm, you know, Pippo Durrani or you know, Elio Castroneves. And I love it. I have a good time with it. And I do everything from that kind of stuff to doing some, you know, Formula V and Spec Miatas as on our SCCA race courses and all that kind of stuff. But what you guys do with sims is a whole lot different than me strapping a wheel on my desk and pedals under my desk, right? A little bit different?
It's a bit different. I don't want to say it's that different, but yeah, you're right.
So tell us a little bit about your sims. Let's start with that.
Certainly. So for us at Spark, we focus on every simulator being a proper training tool for drivers. We know that simulators have been around for a very long time, and in some ways they are a trusted tool. In some ways, people have never gotten to try a proper high-end training simulator, and so simulators often have a bad name. People have tested all different ones, and you hear, oh, I can't keep the car on track. I can't feel the car. I'm constantly spinning on turn one. And our philosophy as a company is that every simulator should be training level. And with our background in aeronautical engineering and hydrodynamics, it allows us to take a physics-based...
So hold on, slow down. You just exceeded my level of knowledge, okay? When you say hydrodynamics, aeronautical engineering, I mean, it's just a thing with a computer and it's like a fancy mouse, right?
That is one of the hurdles of the industry that we see at this point. And I will quote a friend of mine who's also a very famous race coach that the biggest problem in the simulator industry is poor tuning. And to your point earlier about grabbing a wheel, grabbing a set of pedals and plugging it all together, that can get you into a piece of racing software to drive. It is the tuning, and when I say those long words like aeronautical engineering, it's that level of expertise that can take high-end hardware and make it cohesive enough to be a training level simulator.
Right.
I'm speaking on behalf there of my business partner, Joe. I get to run the business side and do what I love, and Joe is one of the smartest engineers I've ever met. His understanding of physics and what looks like math to him is not what looks like math to you and me.
No.
And what that means is we can dive in and take, like I mentioned, a physics-based approach to the simulators. And it really is about the tuning. It's about the configuration. It's about the custom force feedback, the pedal calibration, making sure everything is working beautifully such that when you sit down, what you are doing in the simulator properly translates to on-track driving.
So the friend you're talking about is a friend of mine as well. And we talked, you and I, back before the runoffs about putting a video together so that we could kind of promo the runoffs and promo the SCCA virtual runoffs. And we had a couple of ideas, and I don't know whose idea it was. I'd love to take credit, but I'm not exactly sure it was my idea. But I said, we need to bring in a guy or a gal who's a top-level driver to be part of this video. And I had done some work with this guy in the past, way in my past, when he was driving in IMSA, and I had gotten to do some stuff with him for the podcast as well. And I'm not sure which one of the group of us that talked about this stuff came up with the name, but the name did come up, and whether it was my idea or not, I thought it was a fantastic idea. And we reached out to Dion von Mulkey, and I thought he would be a great guy because of all the stuff he's done and what he was doing to get into your sim to be part of this video. And Dion's reaction was interesting to me, in that he wasn't all automatically all in on this idea, because he was not a guy who was a big fan of Sims, right?
Yes, that is spot on. And feel free to take credit for pulling Dion to the table. Before that situation, I had heard the name Dion von Mulkey. I didn't know him at this point. He's a friend of mine, like he's a friend of yours. Right. I think we can give a shout out to our friend Dan Dennehy Rodriguez at SCCA.
Yeah, we'll give him a little credit too.
Yeah, we'll give Dan some credit. He mentioned that Dion is fantastic as well. Not only is he a top driver with unbelievable credentials, but he's well-spoken. He's able to articulate what's happening. And as we saw when we filmed the video, what he was doing as far as analyzing the experience while driving at high speed, most people can't do that. It's very, very difficult to do. Oftentimes when somebody's driving in the simulator, we ask them one question and they're through the next turn because we take their focus away. So pulling Dion to the table was amazing. And to your point, you're right. Dion is pretty famously, or has been, anti-simulator, and a lot of his clients at Blaze, his one-on-one coaching platform, an unbelievably cool business, they know that. And so in talking to Dion ahead of time and in talking to him about flying up to Connecticut, we flew him up here to film a video, or we hoped to film a video, but it was not a foregone conclusion ahead of time that Dion was going to sit down, enjoy the experience, and endorse the simulators. It was a risk we took. We felt confident in what we've built and the prior feedback we've gotten from drivers, but it was a bit of a waiting game to get Dion up here and see if he enjoyed the experience. And we're happy to say that he ended up endorsing and saying, okay, I get it. I've never used an at-home simulator that was training level. This to me is a driver training tool that you can have at your house.
Exactly. And we worked on that video together, and you could see, and that's why, honestly, the title of the podcast is "Changing a Pro's Mind About Simulators," because I think we pretty squarely did that with this whole thing. So before we've got a video to show of Dion in the simulator. It's a really cool 4 minutes, and it does a great job of showing what it is we're talking about. Before we get to that, though, I think we want to get to this idea. You've got two models that you sell. They're both fantastic. If anybody was at the runoffs, you saw both models at the runoffs, and you're able to sit in them. And we're going to talk about one guy in particular who really spent a lot of time in your runoffs in the sim. That's another great story, because that's what we do here. We tell stories, and hopefully they're good ones. But we're going to talk about that also. But you've got two models. Tell us real quickly about those two, so people understand what it is we're about to show, because this is legit stuff we're talking about.
It is, and I realize it's been too long since we've caught up, because since you and I spoke, we've slotted a third model into the middle, and I'll give a quick rundown, and as you'll see in the video, we have our flagship full motion, fully loaded simulator with triple screens, all the bells and whistles, H-pattern shifter, high-end pedals. And we often hear that motion simulators aren't necessary, and I think you and I might be able to talk about this a little bit later on, and we'll get to the video promptly. But it's about our philosophy on motion tuning and communicating as quickly as possible and realistically as possible what the driver needs to experience. And that's when you have Dion driving and saying, actually, I am experiencing butt feel. And butt feel is a term that drivers love to use, and it is next to impossible to communicate that through a simulator. Most people believe you truly cannot. And with the way that we've tuned the motion platform, we have found a way to do that in a way that someone like Dion driving it can say, wow, I can feel in the seat of my pants what this car is doing. And so that simulator comes in at $86,500. We know it's a flagship model. For us, it trickles down, the DNA from that simulator trickles down to our S300 simulator. It's a fully loaded static simulator with triple 55-inch screens for a panoramic field of view. It has an H-pattern shifter, high-end pedals, high-end Simu Cube wheelbase. We've recently gone Simu Cube only, a boutique manufacturer of ultra high-end wheelbases. You'll see Fanatec wheelbases in the video. We've made some quick and tough decisions over the past few months on who our suppliers are, and that means we've gone with Simu Cube. And another thing that is very important that allows us to communicate the feel of the road on our static simulators is what we call our haptic feedback system. It's dual vibration in both the seat and the pedals. And what we can do is take the often numb experience of a static simulator where you really can't feel too much and communicate things like oversteer, understeer, ABS, curbing, and road noise to take a static experience and make it much more visceral. So that's our middle slotted. It's 43,500 for our fully loaded static model. And then our entry level model now comes in at 20,500. Again, a Simu Cube wheelbase. We use high-end hardware and it's completely turnkey. It includes that haptic feedback to make it a more visceral experience. And so that lineup running from about 21,000, 43,000, 86,000, all training level per Dion's feedback. And that's what we can bring to the table for drivers. It's about selecting which price point is right for you, and then we can help you move forward.
So training level feedback, we're going to hear that a bunch here in the next half hour or so. And that is what sets a simulator like what you have come up with, which is just kind of pretty remarkable, apart from what I have here in my office, my little wheel here behind me. And I didn't just put this here for tonight. It's here for all the podcasts, because this is legit where I do my sim racing right here at the same desk I do the podcasting. So, but that driver training tool, put that in the back of your mind, folks, because that's what we're going to talk about. And you're going to see it here right now with Dion. And then after the video, we're going to come back to so many points that we've talked about, but we want to dig a little bit deeper. So let's watch the video first, Matt, and then we'll come back and we'll get more into it. All right, here we go.
Perfect.
Well, that's altogether not good. Coming back here, Matt, I apologize. For some reason, the video didn't load in. So give me a second here. It's worth taking 10 seconds for me to make this working because it says it's here. Give me 1 second, folks. This is the fun of live stream, of doing things live. And I can absolutely put this in here in post and show it again. Okay, here we go.
As we come through turn 10, I know that it was really late last time on the brakes. I tried to attack harder, and again, I got that car sliding more in the brake zone. I can feel I'm getting close to the limit. You can see my hands fighting the car on early in the brake zone. As I try to apply the throttle out of here, I feel the curve. I feel the car fighting, the car really at the edge of grip on throttle out of here. And that's given me the feedback I need to know how do I adjust my driving, right? So last time into turn 14, I wasn't able to release the brake pressure early enough. So I'm going to brake a little bit earlier here, lighter on the brake pressure. The car's going to slide wide there. And now I'm getting the feedback and I'm able to experiment with those last 5% of inputs like we were talking about into hog pen. So last time I was too early to throttle, the car really understeered wide and I was about to lose it. So this lap I have to brake a little bit earlier, be a little bit more consistent with that brake pressure to get the drive out of here into turn 1. Now to get the immediate feedback on lap time, 48.7. Okay, I need to be a little bit more aggressive on the brakes here. Release off of it, car sliding, the steering wheel gets light, I'm later to throttle, fighting the car on exit there. There we go, exactly where I want. Into turn 3, I need to be much less brake pressure so I'm not shifting as much weight to the front end so I can be more aggressive to throttle. Last lap, into turn 4, I knew I needed to roll more entry speed through here. There we go, that's what I want to see. And you can see there, fighting the rear end, just like I would normally if I rolled too much speed through 5. Use a little bit too much road there. going into the S's. Lots of load going here in the car. So as you turn in, I can feel that load on the outside right rear tire. Coming up, car gets light as we crest the hill. Lots of load on that outside left rear. Be a little bit lighter earlier on the brakes. Car's more underneath me. Back to flat much, much earlier. Getting much higher into shift lights as we approach Oak Tree. There we go. Smoother with my inputs. Back to flat much earlier, using more track. Exactly what I want to see here on the back straightaway. So again, now last lap into turn 14, I released off the brakes a little bit too early, and I got a little bit too much understeer through the middle part of the corner. So my initial brake pressure was what I wanted, just a little bit free. So I'm going to continue to hit that initial brake at the same point, but I need a little bit more pressure here. Get the car a little bit more rotated. There we go. Back to throttle. See if I can hold it flat through 15. Yeah, there we go. Much better. Whoops, a little bit wide. There we go. Back to flat here right in the compression. A little bit of a short shift. Car's understeering. Back onto the front straightaway. Exactly what I want. So now you can see, based off of the feel that I'm getting, I'm experimenting with different things just like I would in real life, but now I'm not losing that precious track time, braking past the 3 board. Can the car hold it? A little bit late of a turn-in point there, not what I want. So a little bit too late of a brake point. I'm able to test these things and not lose that precious in-person, real-life track time. I'm able to test this, experiment with the things that I want to focus on, but in an environment where I can spend all day, which is so important. Lifting off, back to throttle. Woo! Car is starting to lose it. So you can see now the tires, I feel, are starting to wear. I'm not able to get back to full throttle as aggressively, as early as I normally would through 5. So I need to be a little bit smoother with my inputs there. It's forcing me to drive this like I would drive VIR in the middle of the day. The heat's coming up, the tires are getting warm. I have to adjust my driving to the conditions, and I can start to feel that here in my approach to driving this racetrack. So now I know, hey, next lap in turn 5, I need to be a little bit smoother with that throttle input in between 5 and 5A. I need to try to be a little bit later on the lift point, get a little bit more rotation, and then hopefully have a little bit less understeer that causes that oversteer. But I'm not crashing every time I get oversteer here. I'm able to identify it early enough, make the adjustments I need, and keep it on track. And I think I've just done 4 laps in a row without crashing, which is probably a record for me on the sim.
All right, we're back on Inside the SCCA. Brian Belansky, Matt McGivern, my guest here from Spark Virtual Racing, talking about this amazing simulator. Matt, before we get into, I just want folks to notice if they were seeing the video or when they were watching the video, and you saw Dion in the video, it might not have shown, you might not have seen the motion sim moving around a great deal. And that's really important, because when I went to do a motion sim, like if you go to one of like the simulator like facilities where they've got the bar and the grill and a bunch of simulators, and you go with your friends, and those are pretty impressive feeling simulators, but the problem is they're so exaggerated in their motion. I actually get motion sick in those things. And it's not what you feel in a race car. And a lot of people that go to those have never been in a race car, so they don't know what they should be feeling. And one of the things I noticed in your sim is that it feels like I'm actually in a race car.
That's huge for us. It means the world to us. And to your point about Dion in the video, the motion simulator needs to communicate information, not be an amusement ride. And what we do see oftentimes in the feedback we hear is that motion is unnecessary. And part of our reason for our flagship simulator being a motion simulator is if you look at the highest end simulators in the entire world, and we're talking multi-million-dollar simulators, they are all full motion 6 degree of freedom simulators. Our simulator is a full motion 6 degree of freedom simulator. Obviously, the amount that it can move you is different than if it were in a giant room versus being in your house.
Right.
But our motion profile and the way we tune it, based on drivers like Dion and other top drivers sitting down in it, is to communicate what the driver needs to know rather than to be that amusement ride that most motion simulators unfortunately are.
Right. So your simulator, without all of the time and effort of tuning that you've put into it, could throw me around like one of those other ones, right? I mean, I'm sure it can, right?
Could.
Right. You know, and I mean, I've been in situations where it was so, I won't say the words violent, but just over exaggerated to like make you realize you're in a motion sim. And I would get out of them first feeling nauseous, and second saying to myself, that's not like any race car I've ever been in. And that is one of the biggest differences I noticed in the time I got to spend in your sim. And you got similar feedback from Dion, right?
We did. It was very important that feedback to him, because we can also take his level of feedback and make adjustments to what we do. But we've made so many iterations on the motion, and we've got our motion envelope to a point where it's so high fidelity, it communicates so well with the driver that drivers can sit down and feel the simulator and drive from the first lap, which can't be said for most simulator experiences, and I've had them myself, where you demo a simulator for a couple minutes, and at the end of that couple minutes, you have no idea what you felt, and it just didn't feel dialed in.
Right.
We do our best to ensure that dialed in feeling starts right from the moment you take off.
Right. Now, Dion in that particular video was driving a Porsche GT3R, GT3 Cup car, which is essentially what he drove professionally in IMSA. Dion was, I believe, a Porsche factory driver. So the feedback he was giving you, and what was really kind of interesting was he came in the night before we shot the video and spent time in the sim. And you, not you, I got to give Joe the credit. Joe, the aeronautical motion crazy engineer that he is, took that feedback and immediately put it back into the sim, so that when we came to shoot the video, the sim was already more tuned for that Porsche Cup car than it was the night before, right?
Exactly. And that session the day before was when we took the opportunity to figure out if there was even going to be a video, because we needed to make sure that Dion was willing to film with us. It was not a foregone conclusion in him flying up. And then we had you remote in the next day to direct. We had your friend Alex as the videographer. It was quite the production the following day. But the day before that, with Dion driving, we started him in a Spec Miata. That's our bread and butter. And we have a very well-tuned Spec Miata, to the point where we brought it to runoffs, and I won't name names in this situation, but some of the top drivers on the Spec Miata grid sat down and drove that motion simulator with the Spec Miata the way we have it tuned, and they got out and they basically said, okay, that feels just like my car.
That's
and
cool.
That's not often that you get that from a simulator experience. Dion's feedback on the Spec Miata was helpful, but then we had the idea to jump him to something that was more akin to what he drove in his racing career. And as soon as he sat down and we loaded up the GT3, it was just like, it was amazing to watch. It was so much fun to be there. And he was able to communicate some unbelievable nuances about what the car should be doing at each point in time, about the way the steering should feel at each point in time. And to your point, my business partner, Joe, our chief technology officer and my co-founder for Spark, he sat there and just made minute adjustments over the course of some time to get it dialed in. Dion talks in the full length video about that extra 5 or 10%, to the point where he was driving it and he said, okay, that's how it's supposed to feel in that situation when the tires are at this temperature. That's the level of fidelity we push for at Spark.
So now all of that input that came out of that session and went into that particular car, now that's just Dion's super stealthy input, right? You no one else gets the benefit of that, right?
It depends on the client. So we don't keep secrets, and we share throughout our client base, because we have a lot of Porsche drivers. And so they don't necessarily all have a GT3R. Some of them drive Turbo S's, some of them drive GT3 RS's, but we can take that type of input. And when we link up with our clients over remote support, which is a major factor and value add for us as a company, the ability for us to remote in, make adjustments, and help our clients continue to get faster, whether it's the setup of the car, whether it's the feel of the steering wheel, the firmness of the pedals and the brake pedal, when the ABS kicks in. All of that is continually adjustable, and it's part of the relationship that we develop with our clients. So to your point, yes, we took some of Dion's input and we distributed it to some of our other Porsche sports car driving clients.
Right. So their baseline is better because of the collective input of all the sessions that you do with all of your clients, right?
It is.
So every time you get a new client who's working on a specific car, And what you learn from that client with that car, that data is helpful to the next person or the other people maybe in that are already clients, and they can get an update with that new info so that their car gets closer and closer and closer, their sim car gets closer and closer and closer to the car that they're going to roll out of the trailer at the racetrack on Friday morning, right?
It is. And a primary question we get as part of our relationship building process pre-purchase with the client is, what cars and tracks can I get? And obviously you mentioned you race iRacing. We specialize in both iRacing and R Factor 2. And so we ask our clients for a list of tracks, a list of cars that they're interested in, and then we tell them we will get you the nearest model to what is available for your car.
Right.
Rather than just throw a skin on any car and call it yours. That's not the modeling and the fidelity that we push for. So in R Factor 2 in particular, we've worked extensively on the GT3 RS that's available. And like I mentioned, we do have a few Turbo S clients that take their Turbo S out on the track. It's not a dedicated track car, but it's certainly a fast and fun car. And for those clients, because a Turbo S is not available, we give them the GT3 RS that has so much feedback from our different clients on the tuning side. And it really does create that level of training that's important to our clients.
So before we got Dion to come to Connecticut to your facility, he was under the value for him of a simulator was teaching a driver which way the track goes. He called it a track a track familiarization tool. I speak for a living. I should be able to say that word. And in the course of what happened on the night before the shoot and the day of the shoot, the terminology went from from that track tool, that track learning tool, to driver training tool, to something that he felt he could use to make himself a better race car driver. And one of the things, and the other thing I want to tell folks is we're going to put a link in the show notes here to the long video, which was 25 minutes. It's a spectacular 25-minute video, by the way. And in that video, you're going to see a whole lot of different angles of the motion sim and the static sim, and it gives you a really good idea of all the different moving parts and bits and pieces. So we didn't get to see a lot of that in the 4-minute video we just showed. Go watch that video. You'll see a lot more. But you could hear Dion talk about in that video how he could use this to be a better race car driver. And what was interesting about it was, and you know, when you know the concept of 10,000 hours.
Certainly.
So the concept of 10,000 hours is to become an expert in anything, you have to spend 10,000 hours in doing it. Driving a race car 10,000 hours on a racetrack is exceedingly expensive. I mean, we all know this. We're you know, it's inside the SCCA. We're race car drivers, and we know what it costs to put any car on the racetrack. Even if you're putting the most cost-efficient race car on the racetrack, to do that for 10,000 hours, I don't know that that's even possible to do it. So when you need the reps to do something over and over and over to get the muscle memory, to learn what the car does, it's really impossible to do that on a racetrack. And this is the first tool Dion says that he has been in, right, that he felt could simulate that experience so that you can get those 10,000 hours in the luxury of your garage or your home or wherever you set the thing up, right?
It is, and that's an important distinction to make. For us, it boils down to we've adjusted the terminology a bit, part of it for pronunciation purposes. We have what we call track memorization tools, which is what we feel a lot of the market is and what a lot of people have experienced, where they can't feel the car, they can't push the car, but to Dion's point, you can learn where the track goes. But aside from that, Dion's point is that you're likely to develop bad habits if you're not in a training level simulator. And so we have track memorization tools and we have driver training tools. And that's the term that Dion goes with almost right from the beginning of the video. They call all these things simulators. Not all simulators are created equal. I would venture to call this a driver training tool. And from Dion's background, we talk about this in the full-length video when he and I sit down for a bit of an interview. Dion has gotten to experience the multi-million-dollar professional facility factory simulators. And that's not practical for most people. Even renting those is often $8 or $10 or $12,000 a day. So the average person isn't going to get their value other than the wow factor and adding it to their bucket list. And for Dion's experience, and this is the way he was pitching it around Blaze, he would help clients utilize simulators for mental training and for track layouts. But he was explicitly saying, aside from that, he worries about people developing bad habits based on what the simulator is communicating. And that was essentially our hypothesis in bringing him up here was, can someone like Dion, who is anti-sim, at least anti-home sim for what it could do to your driving habits, is he willing to say, okay, I will endorse this because I believe you can improve your skills based on the fidelity of the tuning here and what is being communicated to you. And luckily for us, obviously, you know from experience because you were there filming over Zoom that day, did go well for us. But yes, that is the distinction. A track memorization tool is what we feel most simulators are. We have put so much time, energy, and R&D to take the market and move it toward driver training tools to truly improve your skills from home.
Okay, so I wish you would have saved me an hour ago by telling me it was now a track memorization tool, because that would have saved me from trying to get that other word out a half a dozen times, but that's okay. Listen, Matt, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more about the session with Dion and what he learned and what has. Is it an announcement? Is it we're going to talk more about what you two are doing together. We're going to do that next. Stay with us. This is Inside the SCCA. All right, we are back. My videos aren't working, Matt, and it's really, really frustrating. But it's live. It's a live thing, so we're going to do the breaks another time, and we're just going to keep going with the conversation. So when we started sitting down with Dion, even after being in the sim on the night before, I still didn't think he was 100% convinced. And as the day went on, he was just more and more excited about what he was doing.
He was, and it was a long day. Dion is unbelievable on camera. And as I mentioned earlier, talking like he was doing while putting down fast laps, it's not for everyone. It's for very few people. But yes, we started off filming in the S600. We did probably a couple hours. We had so much content from that day that even getting it down to the video length that it is now felt like we were cutting out sound bites that were unbelievably valuable and we felt bad about. Then Dion moved over to the S100. He gave us his feedback there. And so while it was a long day, it was an incredibly productive day. And the end result was we got it dialed in. We weren't doing any dialing in that day, but dialing it from the day in before and allowing Dion to put down some laps. By the end of that day, like you said, he had changed his tune. I believe the title of the video is Spark Changes Pro Racer Dion von Moltke's Mind About Simulators. And that title came from Dion, by the way. That wasn't us planting seeds. Okay. We confirmed with him that he was cool with that. And that's pretty much what happened over the course of the day. It was a fantastic day here.
So what else do we need to know? I mean, there's obviously a financial commitment to do this. It's not an inexpensive process. And if I'm considering doing this, I don't want to just write this check without ever getting a chance to spend a decent amount of time in a sim. So what's the solution for that? What if I want to buy one of these, but I'm on the edge? What do we do?
We host drivers, prospective drivers, and clients all the time at our facility in Connecticut. We're just east of Hartford, not difficult to get to. And we often have drivers fly out just to test. So if the video doesn't convince people to go ahead and make the purchase, which oftentimes the video does build enough trust that people are ready to move forward, because we know that people out there are looking to buy a simulator. And once they hear an endorsement like Dion's, it puts them over the edge to reach out, to move forward with the purchase. Because at this point, it's well known that everybody wants a simulator. And unfortunately, based on experiences at different demos and things, very few people have had good simulator experiences. And for us, like you mentioned, the financial commitment, we understand the DIY angle. The DIY built this market. We have the utmost respect for people that build their own simulator. And what we've done is taken that essence of DIY, put in our own expertise and value, and built it into something that Dion wasn't a believer that you could build a DIY sim that was training quality. Because once we talk more about it, and he talks about this in the full-length video, it's the tuning that differentiates it. And the manufacturers of the hardware, the pedals, the steering wheels, they love to say that it's plug and play. But what we found is if you just take everything and plug it in, all you've done is built yourself a track memorization tool. You have not basically validated it as a training tool until you dive into the tuning. And for most people whose time is incredibly valuable, especially if you have the ability to go racing, your time is valuable. And so working through the headaches of doing the research, buying the parts, building your own simulator, then just to end up with a track memorization tool is a disappointing prospect. And so we are there for the people that want to save the time and the headaches on that and certify per Dion that they are getting something that can help them improve their skills from home.
All right, so let's take this love fest to the next level, and you and Spark Virtual Racing and Dion von Moltke and his company Blaze Coaching have done more than just a video since we did that back in whenever it was, August, I think. The relationship between your two organizations has grown, and I'm excited about it. Because I feel like I was there at the inception. Tell me what you guys are doing.
Certainly. So first off, where did these 7 months go that was August?
I know.
am confused. Yeah, that was a long time ago. I can't believe it. Since then, we have been building our relationship with Dion. We've been working some things out. We feel that pairing world-class simulators with world-class one-on-one coaching is just a perfect match. So we have very recently, Dion just announced it in the Blaze newsletter this week, Spark has become the official simulator partner of Blaze, and Blaze is the official coaching partner of Spark. And that means that every simulator we sell comes with a year subscription to Blaze Coaching, all of their content, a certain number of coaching videos, depending on which type of video or race analysis you want back from Dion and his unbelievable lineup of coaches. And we've already had some of our clients pre-partnership, so before we've gotten this rolling, they've signed on with Blaze, and they absolutely love the ability to upload videos from their simulator, the footage, and get videos back from Dion or one of his coaches. Particularly if you live up north, we have a Michigan-based client who works with Dion directly. There's only so many months in the year when you live in Michigan that you can be on the real-world track, and so our clients have started to fall in love with training from home, uploading their videos, and improving their skills. And now every client going forward will have that. Blaze is promoting us as their official simulator partner, and they are our official coaching partner.
And for those who might not know a lot about what Blaze does, we will take and I'll put in the show notes here as well links to the podcast I did with Dion, which digs right into all the different things and how his coaches help people. And he put together a deal where he was able to help coach people leading up to the runoffs and through the runoffs. And that was really pretty awesome. So so that'll all be there for folks to see. So you can see the link between the two and why there's so much symmetry between you and Dion and what you're all trying to do. So speaking of the runoffs, there was a guy at the runoffs, and not your typical racer, because, well, you know, it's funny. I say that, but over the years, there have been several NFL players and pro sports players who've crossed over into motorsports. Walter Payton did it. The Mayer brothers, world class gold medal winning downhill skiers came over. Robin Yount, all-star Hall of Famer from the Milwaukee Brewers, Drive to Sports 2000 back in the day. So there is a lot of opportunities where pro sports people have in their retirement come over and gone racing with us. But there's a guy who was at the runoffs this year, and he spent a lot of time in your sims. Tell us this story.
Certainly. And you know this. I texted him yesterday to confirm that we could tell this story, use his name. Fantastic guy. So this is Jared Odrick, former NFL player, who was at runoffs. He was driving a GT3 Cup car. And with all the classes within SCCA, I apologize, I don't know which class that fell into.
I think it was in GT2. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, GT2. And we had seen Jared at a couple other events because he's based in the Northeast, went to Penn State. I'm a huge fan. I have family that went to Penn State. So that was just fun to get to pal around with him. And what were we there for 4 or 5 days?
Mm-hmm.
And every morning, by the time we opened up the simulators just to get rolling, he was there ready to put down laps and warm up for his race. And we almost carved off like private sessions for him if other people came up, just because he was there to train, to get his reps in, to get his laps in before his race. We had a great time talking to him. We even grabbed one of our friends, Chris Noon's MX5 Cup from the past 2 seasons. He was there on behalf of Mazda Motorsports.
Right.
He hopped over, did a little bit of coaching for Jared over his shoulder. We had a lot of fun over the course of the few days, and Jared logged, 3-4 hours in the sim over the course of the time there, and it was just a blast.
Yeah, and I remember talking to him briefly between sessions. I know there was a lot of other people who wanted to drive your sims too. So he did jump out when there are other people there, and he had mentioned that he felt that because he improved every session, which most drivers would do, but he suggested that he improved more each session because of the time he was spending in your sim.
Certainly. And when we think about professional athletes, any other sport, you're training every day, multiple sessions per day in the off season, year round. Like NBA players don't just hang out. They practice, they work on their games, they shoot around. Racing, and Dion mentions this in the video, he talks about it at length, the full length video. Reps are the most challenging thing for race car drivers, whether you're getting 5 days a year or 20 days a year. For the most part, you just show up and race. And so if you don't have a training level simulator at home, you're not staying sharp. You might have a track memorization tool because you're going to a track you haven't been to in a while or that you've never been to before. And you learn where the track goes, which is nice, but you're not learning your true braking points, your turn-ins, your track outs, how you want to shift the weight throughout the lap. And showing up there at VIR, unbelievably technical track, so many turns there, and just figuring it out as you go, you're at a distinct disadvantage. Whereas if you are training from home ahead of time, you can show up and be working on the setup of your car, not only in the simulator, but have your setup ready to go by the time you get to the track. And then rather than dialing it in and shaving off seconds throughout practice and qualifying, you can get to the point where you're dialed in and just shaving off tenths because you have it ready to go.
Well, and that was one of the things that we talked about with Dion is that, it's such an important tool if you have it, because you've got, in some cases, you've got almost no practice time before you have to qualify, and this is the perfect situation where, you can get all of those jitters out the week before. If you have your car and the track is in the sim, obviously not all the tracks are available out there, and we do have some tracks in the club that we race on that aren't in iRacing, but a lot of them are, and you can always find the track that's kind of similar to the one you're going to race on if yours isn't there or whatever you're going to race on next. But it just takes, it almost gives you an extra practice session before a race weekend.
It does. And it's as many practice sessions as you want. We have clients that are on every day, and it's really fun because they improve faster when they get more quality reps in.
Right.
And that's what the point that Dion makes in the video is. It's not just about reps, but it's about quality reps. And there's a certain section where he talks about getting the ability to experiment, because most of the time you're showing up at a track weekend and you have limited practice, qualifying is key, and then you're in the race. You don't have the ability to experiment with different lines,
right,
with different braking points, with anything. You're looking at your telemetry data and deciding on what you think is best. But there, if I'm remembering correctly, Dion says this is the right environment to experiment, to figure out what works best for you at each track, because every driver has their own tendencies. Obviously, there is that mythical perfect line, perfect lap, but everybody drives slightly differently, and being able to work that muscle memory on something that translates to the track, and trying new lines, messing with your racecraft, all of those things are important, and you just don't get enough time to do it when you're just showing up at a race weekend and then trying to get up to speed.
And if you think about it, it is extremely cost effective. I know people.
It is.
When they're looking at me at home, they're looking and they're going, "Huh? How is it cost effective? It cost $88,000." Have you ever balled up a race car, Matt?
I personally have not.
Yeah, well, I
don't
have.
Want to.
I have. I didn't get $88,000 worth of damage, thankfully. But it ain't hard to get there. It is not hard to put a world of hurt on your pocketbook by balling up a race car at a racetrack. And if you can do that testing, that let's try this wild line. And if you make a mistake in your sim, it's gonna hurt your ego, but it ain't gonna hurt your pocketbook. And it really is the best place to go and do that testing in your brain, testing in your muscle memory, testing with some setups maybe, because you can't other than the initial investment of buying your sim, which obviously is a big deal. I watched the IndyCar race at St. Pete.
Oh, crazy, right?
Okay. Do you know how much money? Do you have any idea how much money? I got a friend of mine who works with IndyCar, and he did a little tally in his head, and they balled up well over $2 million worth of race cars. Okay.
Wow.
Boy, just think about how much you wouldn't have balled up if you were driving it in a race sim. Now that's obviously an extreme because we're talking about the highest level of pro racing. But club racers, most of us, don't have an unlimited checkbook, to be able to buy new race cars. So I don't mind it when I crash on this thing back here. I love it, actually. But if it keeps you from crashing on the racetrack, that's a big deal.
It is, and that's where it's important that the skills and the fidelity is there to translate to the track, because you don't want to be doing something crazy and thinking you can pull it off in the real world because you did it in your sim, but your sim isn't dialed in enough to translate well. And that's really when Dion talks about developing bad habits in the sim. He worries about those types of things, that the things you can get away with don't translate properly. There's something in the sim that we just refer to as the time warp. And it's about when you get dialed into a really good session on the simulator, 30, 40, 55 minutes, sometimes it's a couple hours go by. You're not even paying attention because all you're doing is watching your lap times go down. You're developing your muscle memory. And we get people reach out now that we have this distinction between a track memorization tool and a proper driver training tool. And they know they want a driver training tool because they want to learn to drive near the limit, but they're not willing to risk their one race car. Most people don't have a fleet of race cars, to the point you just made. And you don't want to get near the limit because if you ball up your car, your racing career for the year or possibly for multiple years is gone. And so when you say the cost-effective side of things and people's jaws hit the floor because we're at 20 grand, 44 grand, 86 grand, when we do talk to someone who says, well, I spend this much per weekend, I race this many weekends per year, the simulator's going to last me this many years, this just financially makes sense because I'm getting legitimate training to complement what I'm doing at the track and to allow me to maximize my time there versus getting up to speed and not really being able to get near the limit of the car.
Right.
So when you do look at it that way, it does make sense. I know not everyone's willing to make that leap, but it is there.
Right. So if I buy one of your sims and put in the order and give you the check or however it's paid for, what happens next?
At that point, every simulator we have is made to order. So our lead time based on our ability to get parts is usually 8 to 10 weeks. The way that we price is the price of the sim plus sales tax plus a destination fee. We do not ship you a simulator, tell you to hire some buddies and move it into your house and complete the configuration. This is an unbelievably complex piece of equipment that we present in the simplest way that we possibly can. All the simulators in our lineup run off single button startup so that you can just use it. You don't need to be an engineer in order to operate your simulator. Right. It should be something that you take pride going down there, hitting the button and getting it rolling. And our destination fee includes shipping, white glove installation, and hardware adjustments on the other end to make sure that it fits with your longer or shorter arms, your legs, making sure the brake pedal has the firmness you want and is in the position you want, making sure that the hardware fitting is dialed in the way you want it. Sometimes the car, the track car, the GT3 RS is sitting right next to the simulator because we're in the garage. We take out a tape measure, we can take the measurements, we can take the actual tilt angle of the steering wheel, and we can bake that in during your hardware fitting so that when you do sit down in the sim, even though you don't have the full cockpit around you because in the sim it's not necessary, if you opt for the triple screens, it's fully panoramic. And we do encourage people, although it is significantly higher dollars, to opt up for the S300 and the triple 55-inch screens. We get the question, oh, why would I need triple screens? I'm not looking at them. Well, you know, as a driver, and they recognize as soon as I say this, sometimes you are looking out your window because that's where the apex is and you need to be able to look there.
Right.
But also one of the challenges in a simulator is understanding speed because you don't have sustained G-forces. And the ability to process what's going on next to you is, in that case, how we process speed. So you can't look in your peripheral vision just based on the fact that you can't technically look in it, but you are always processing your peripheral vision, and that's the best way to understand how quickly you're speeding up and how quickly you're slowing down.
Right. All right, so if I want to test drive, how do I do this?
We encourage you to come on out to Connecticut. We have the same models that Dion tested in the video. They are ready to put down some laps. We often ask which cars ahead of time and which tracks drivers are interested in. We guide people toward the tracks that they are most familiar with. We've run into trouble in the past when people pick their bucket list track, and then you realize that you don't actually know as well as you think where the track goes from watching the F1 race or the IndyCar race. So generally, we set people up with a car that is drivable for them. And within their skill set, I'll say we're not going to throw you in an F1 car. Spec Miata is a better place to start on a track that you're very familiar with to get the feel. And for us, we've learned from going to plenty of events that it's not a 5-minute demo that's going to convince you to buy a simulator. We are very selective about the events we go to at this point because it's private sessions, hour-long sessions that allow you to get into that time warp and drive for 20, 30, 40 minutes and start to understand the value of putting down that many laps one after another to get that rhythm, to get that muscle memory, and then to decide to move forward with one for your home.
So while you take the time to set up basically your car, whatever it is closest to what you drive on the racetrack, because your sim is connected in with iRacing and rFactor, you can still go do an F1 car on one of your bucket list tracks. All those options are still there, but obviously all of the cars are not purposely set up for you when you get your sim. So, but you can still go have fun and still run, the McLaren at Monaco, right?
You certainly can. It's an unbelievably tight track. TV doesn't do it any justice. But to your point, getting a high-level simulator is an opportunity to immediately have a fleet of race cars because we know most people have one, maybe two cars, and they get really good at driving that car. But if you think about Dion's career and the career of other top professional drivers, they drive multiple classes of car throughout their career, and each class has some different tendencies that allow you to develop a really broad skill set. So if you finally have the money to go racing and you take your Cayman S out there, you're learning to become a really good Cayman S driver, but you can also benefit from a Spec Miata. You can benefit from a low downforce open wheeler, a high downforce open wheeler, cars that are faster and slower than yours, to develop that broader skill set that most of us never get the chance to develop because we don't have the prolific career and drive at the Rolex 24 like Dion did. You can immediately have a fleet of different types of car at your disposal in the sim.
Right. All right, so we're burning on 54 minutes here, Matt. I can't imagine there's anything we haven't covered yet, but I always like to ask the question, is there anything we haven't covered yet we should talk about?
Off the top of my head, I just appreciate the time. It's always great to catch up. Obviously, it's been too long, and it's been 7 months since we filmed the video. Again, where did that time go? But I just appreciate you spending the time with me today, getting to talk about the video, about our new partnership with Blaze, and about our philosophy on simulators. It really is about moving the industry forward so that everything is a training tool. And I know not everyone likes to hear that because the DIY market built this industry. But just as a testament to Dion and him finally endorsing a simulator, when he made that announcement this week, we immediately got Blaze clients reaching out saying, we've been looking for a simulator for a while, and we know that Dion is anti-sim until he made this announcement. That endorsement sealed the deal for us, and that's our focus. It's about bringing that training level to your home.
All right, so you're going to be traveling for the next 18 months, putting in new simulators and keeping yourself busy there. If people want to get in touch, how do they do it?
Our website is drivesvr.com. My email is matt@drivesvr.com. Please feel free to put that in the notes. Please feel free to reach out directly to me. I love talking to people about racing, about what their goals are for training from home, what tracks they drive at. If we're traveling for installs for the next 18 months, I can't wait. We actually love install day with our clients. It's a blast. It's always fun.
Last question before we go. You come and do the install. You set up a car for me. I never see you again, right?
Well, we often catch up with clients at events in person, and that's always fun. But as I mentioned, a huge value add for Spark is our ongoing remote support. It is basically concierge level. We have clients reach out with some sort of issue, and when you're taking such complex pieces of hardware and making them work together seamlessly, there are issues that pop up. I'm not going to sit here and say everything works perfectly all the time, but it shouldn't be you that's surfing the forums to try to get a specific thing fixed. And if you build your own, that's going to be the case. If you work with a company like ours, we can remote in, we can get it fixed, we can get you back on track quickly, and that's something that our clients have come to value from us.
Matt, thank you.
Brian, thank you. This has been a blast.
Fun. All right, my guest is Matt McGivern, Spark Virtual Racing. If you like what you're hearing and want to hear more of this, make sure you subscribe to the Racing Wire Podcast Network and the Racing Network on YouTube. Also, be great if you leave some comments, especially good ones. If it's not a good one, put it on someone else's social media page. You can follow us on social media to find out who our next guest is. And that is at RacingWireNet on Twitter. There is a brand new Inside the SCCA every week. We're now live on Wednesdays, and then the podcast drops on Fridays like it always has. I'm Brian Belansky. Have yourself a great weekend, and go play with cars. Inside the SCCA is a presentation of the Racing Wire Podcast Network and Rule 15 Productions. This podcast is not affiliated with, endorsed, or sponsored by the Sports Car Club of America. The views expressed within are those of the host and our guests, and not that of the SCCA.